Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another ITY video. Today I have with me Mike Regan. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at LogRhythm. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I thought I'd start off the way I always do and ask you if you could please tell us about LogRhythm in 2016, maybe a little bit of its history and also a bit about your personal history in the world of tech.
Sure. So let's see, LogRhythm's been around for about 12 years as a leader in security information and event management. And we've evolved. In 2016, we're now seen as the leader in security intelligence. We're here at the Gartner conference this week, and Gartner categorizes LogRhythm as a SIEM, or Security Information Event Management company, and a leader, once again, in their SIEM-MQ.
Sure, and we'll go into more detail into that in a moment.
Yeah.
So what about your own history in the world of tech?
Well, I've been with LogRhythm for 9 of the company's 12 years. We've been in business. And prior to that, I spent another 7 years in information security with a DLP company. And in total, I've got about 30 years in IT.
So today you were at the aforementioned Gartner Security and Risk Management Summit we're here right now. So what was your talk about and what were the top takeaways that you wanted to have resonate with the audience?
Well, so when I initially submitted the abstract for the talk, it was all around behavioral analytics and how they can be used to accelerate detection and response to advanced threats when they're used in real time. And I was going to use some real use cases as examples of that value proposition. And when I was flying to Australia for this conference, I was reading a Wall Street Journal article that appeared in the paper last Friday, and it was about ransomware. And I thought to myself, that is the ideal use case to explain the value of early detection and response, because for ransomware, usually the attack lasts anywhere from seconds to minutes. This is not hours, days, months, or even years.
No, once it's activated, bang, it's doing its damage already.
Yeah, that's right. So in terms of how behavioral analytics can accelerate detection to a point where you can detect it soon enough to take action so that there's not material impact from that threat, ransomware is a perfect example. So my talk went through how ransomware gets executed and how advanced behavioral analytics can detect those indicators available through log and machine data from the endpoint, from the network, from user activities, and all be collected and analyzed to surface the indicators that a ransomware attack is afoot.
And then stop it in real time.
That's correct.
I mean, I know that I was at an event where Trend Micro, talking about consumer-based security, was talking, and they said that they had anti-ransomware in their software, and they say that it worked by analyzing if things were being encrypted, and after the first 2 files were encrypted, it stopped it and protected you. I mean, you lost 2 files. You saved the rest of your computer. So, I mean, I'm assuming that your software is able to work in some similar way to detect that and then stop it and pop up a thing saying, hey, we just stopped a ransomware attack.
Yes. Well, we're to distinguish between what Trend was describing and LogRhythm's value prop as it relates to ransomware, our real value is in protecting organizations, not a specific individual laptop or endpoint. The speed at which that encryption may occur is swift. And there are a few AV applications out there that are able to deal with.
Well, I mean, I was surprised to hear Trend describing what they do the way they do it. You know, it's sort of was new. It's like, hey, I haven't heard that before. But again, that's consumer. It's very different to the way that enterprises are looking at their security.
Yeah. So the use case for LogRhythm is detecting the presence of ransomware through a myriad of points along that life cycle, even though it's a very short life cycle, that ranges from the initial infection to the communication back to the command and control system that will initiate a key, initiate the deletion of all the backups of those files, and then ultimately begin the encryption process. What we're focused on is detecting soon enough to stop that encryption process from extending beyond that single laptop. And most corporate employees that get infected happen to have access to network shares and files on those shares that are often shared with many other employees as well. Our goal is to protect those network shares, and we're doing it quite well.
And presumably you would then also work with backup software that is backing up those computers so that if some poor employee has had their machine obliterated by ransomware, they can be restored not necessarily with your software, but through their other backup software, so that person is back up and running.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the backup software because the backup removal, part of the whole ransomware process includes a process called backup spoliation, which is when the ransomware software goes out and hunts for all the various backup copies of the files they're about to encrypt.
Yes.
And so what we do is we recognize that process kicking off. And again, that's just a trigger in the detection process of the presence of ransomware. So it's not so much going out and interacting with backup software, but recognizing the attempt to remove those backups.
Sure. And I guess your customers must be reporting that it's really helping to stop the scourge of ransomware.
Absolutely, yeah, and certainly mitigating the impact when the bad guys get in.
Sure.
And yeah, I'd say that's a big theme that most organizations are coming to embrace, and that is that it's inevitable that the bad actors will get in. The question is what we do in light of that reality.
That's right. Well, one of the previous interviews I was just doing was with another company talking about specifically how, the bad guys are going to get in, and it's what you do after that really counts.
That's right. And Gartner, the various analysts in their presentations this week were really emphasizing the importance of that organizations begin to focus on becoming increasingly resilient. Amidst that reality that the bad guys will get in, establish a strategy to improve your security maturity so that you can perpetually become more resilient. And that's what LogRhythm is helping organizations do.
Now, you were also, as you mentioned before, the leader in the SIEM category with Gartner again. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's been an exciting year, and particularly the last month or so since the new report came out. I think the placement of the vendors in the leaders quadrant reflected a material shift for a number of the vendors. So we experienced the highest move up and to the right of any of the leaders. There are a few leaders that moved materially down and to the left. And I think the Gartner's reflection of that change is indicative of realization of the importance of ongoing innovation, particularly in this technology segment. So these technologies are designed to help organizations detect and respond to cyber threats. And if the vendors offering that platform aren't innovating rapidly and continuously, the end users will have their blind spots grow. Yeah.
And I'm sure many people watching know LogRhythm, but for those that don't, does your software displace other security solutions, or do you work with them? For example, if one of the things you talk about on your website is endpoint protection.
Yeah.
If someone's already got endpoint protection software, do you work with that, or does that go away when you put your solution in?
We absolutely do work with that. We consume and normalize log and event data from over 750 different log and data source types. Sometimes those are endpoint protection applications. Sometimes they're servers or physical infrastructure devices. But we have a very broad network of technology partners that we work with to be able to consume their log and machine data, but also to reach back out through smart response and automated response mechanisms to not just help us detect, but also mitigate the threat and get in there and respond quickly.
Sure. Now, we spoke about ransomware, and in the context of organizations being blind to a growing number of these sorts of threats. I suppose in one sense, if they've been attacked by ransomware, or they know other people that have their eyes are wide open. But what are some of the other threats that you're helping companies to really protect against, and examples where customers are materially benefiting from your software?
Sure. Well, the variety is immense. We have customers in virtually every industry. We have utility customers that are deploying us to help protect critical infrastructure. So we're collecting log and machine data from SCADA systems and monitoring for abnormalities there to get...
And we know, of course, about the whole SCADA threat when the Iranian nuclear centrifuges were being attacked through SCADA systems. So that must be a huge thing now for especially utilities not wanting to be taken offline, and you have these cyber attacks against the grid.
That's right. Yeah, and there's also a broadening of the definition of critical infrastructure. It's beyond just the electric utility framework. It also includes healthcare. Oftentimes that a healthcare infrastructure spans an entire country. Sometimes it's global. Your financial services infrastructure, that's being considered part of critical infrastructure as well. For many bank customers of ours, we're helping them to detect fraud.
Yeah.
So, for example, one bank customer uses LogRhythm to complement their fraud detection software because there are data elements that we consume and analyze that span well beyond the scope of the fraud detection software application. So, for example, I can think of one bank that monitors their online banking environment to detect a scenario such as when an online banking customer logs in multiple times from multiple locations and performs a withdrawal from multiple locations within a very short period of time.
Yes.
So that means it's probably a hacker network all using the same credentials to come in and steal money.
And was that a use of LogRhythm that you hadn't necessarily planned for, but could see that it was very synergistic with the way you do things, and it's like, yeah, we can do that too?
Well, that's a good point. The value LogRhythm provides to customers is both in terms of the out-of-the-box capabilities and scenarios that it's designed to detect right out of the box.
Yeah.
But then there's also those, if not unique, certainly custom situations that may be specifically related to the business of the customer.
Yeah.
And they can leverage our analytics and our data capture capability to look for those scenarios that they can conceive of.
Yeah.
And the fraud is a good example.
Sure. And I mean, if you can then do that with a new sector or a new segment of the IT or financial whatever space, you can then go, oh, we can offer those solutions to other companies too that we hadn't previously been offering that solution to.
That's right. And we have a community experience for all of our customers that gives them a forum where they can share best practices.
Yeah.
And where one bank maybe created a set of rules to look for certain scenarios that may be applicable to another bank, they too can share it with one another.
Sure.
Yeah.
So before I ask you about the future or other questions, is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience about the way LogRhythm is operating that's different to competitors or dovetails with what some of the other competitors are doing to increase security for all?
Sure. Well, there was a Gartner analyst that gave a talk this morning on SIEM and how the SIEM market's evolving. And one of the interesting market dynamics that he was describing was the introduction of standalone analytics products and vendors. And while the value and promise of analytics is very high, at the end of the day, it needs to be part of a holistic approach to achieving security intelligence. So I think what's happening in the market and will continue to happen is organizations will be placing more and more value on a full platform that can provide end-to-end threat lifecycle management. There's a growing intolerance for adding more and more products that are siloed in their functionality to the product mix and to the tool belt of
Well, it just makes everything more complicated, even though it's supposed to deliver better security.
That's right. That's right. So in terms of what sets LogRhythm apart, we've developed a core security intelligence platform that does in fact provide that end-to-end threat lifecycle management, from data collection and normalization of those logs to the sophisticated analysis performed against that log and machine data, to the alerting and smart automated response, and then the full workflow. So end-to-end, a full threat lifecycle management platform that is also capable of leveraging existing infrastructure and technology.
Sure.
So I think it's we hear from customers that end-to-end capability is one of the greatest values and unique capabilities that we bring to market.
Sure. And analytics and big data have been buzzwords, and things have been maturing. Clearly, the way you're using it to help people to understand the threats has matured over the past few years. There's also things like cloud and hybrid cloud, other buzzwords, and other buzzwords, digital transformation. Are you using that one in the way that you explain to customers how you're transforming their security stances?
We try to steer clear of buzz terms, but when customers use them, and particularly when customers allocate budget dollars to those terms, we'll start using them.
Absolutely.
But
I mean, they all have merit anyway. I mean, digital transformation. Someone was telling me, looking at the other side of the camera the way you are, they were saying, well, in the past you would have had a tape recorder or maybe something with the tape, and now you're doing it all from an iPhone.
Right.
And that's digital transformation.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The theme of digital transformation is reflective of what a dynamic that information security professionals need to address,
Yeah.
because it introduces a whole new realm of new threats and new threat vectors.
Yeah.
So LogRhythm understands that, and at the end of the day, we're empowering our customers to consume all of the data that reflects the digital fingerprints of everything that happens in an enterprise.
And meaningfully act upon that information.
That's right. Yeah. Well said.
So how do you see, looking into the crystal ball, the threats evolving and the responses from the good guys and this whole cat and mouse game that we're undergoing at the moment over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. Well, I guess first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge the bad guys are innovating a heck of a lot faster than the companies developing technology to keep them out.
Yeah.
So
which is forcing you to act even faster still.
That's right. Yeah. So it creates a pace of innovation, particularly at LogRhythm, where this is all we do.
Yeah.
We develop security intelligence solutions to help organizations detect the bad guys when they get in.
Yeah.
And detect them soon enough so that action can be taken, so they can't achieve their ultimate goal, whether it's data theft or taking a service offline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that theme of innovation from the bad guys exceeding that of the companies designing technology to protect against them will continue for some time.
Sure. I mean, it's funny. It's the bad guys who are forcing you to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's live, isn't it?
It's keeping us, focused on innovation.
Yeah.
And I think if you look across the market, it's creating a massive challenge for a lot of companies that aren't that nimble, that can't innovate that quickly, and they'll perpetually find themselves behind the times.
Well, that's why they would come to companies like you, so they could say that they're implementing the latest technologies, and that helps them to remain agile.
Agreed. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
So when we get to this part of the interview, I always like to ask if you could please share the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today. Helps to humanize you, as opposed to talking about all the technical marketing things that you do.
Well, I've been very fortunate. I've received an awful lot of good advice over the years. To pick one, I guess it would come from a dinner where I sat next to a U.S. Senator Bob Dole, and I was speaking at the event. He was speaking at the event. Somehow they placed us next to one another.
Yep.
And I was always told, always have a good question if you ever sit next to someone famous.
Yeah.
So I asked him. I said,
"What's the best piece of advice you ever
exactly.
received to help you get where you are today?"
That's exactly what I asked him. And he said, "No, it wasn't quite that." I said, "What was the greatest lesson you've learned in all the years in public service?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Keep your word." And I thought that was very sound, and sort of. Totally
especially for a politician,
right?
right?
Totally aligned with that. Yeah, and he gave some examples. He was like, look, if I told Tom Daschle I was going to vote one way on a certain bill, and Tom Daschle was the leader of the opposing party, he said, I kept my word. I voted that way. And I think that rings true, very true in business.
Yeah. Well, reputation is hard earned and easily lost. So that's excellent advice.
Yeah.
So, what's your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers?
Sure. So it is IT Wire. So there's technology, a technology bent here. So one thing I would say is, despite the challenging cybersecurity threat landscape, particularly with the growing awareness that the bad guys are getting in, just because they get in doesn't have to mean that they're going to get away with the goods.
Yeah.
And to focus on improving and continuously improving security intelligence, that being defined as the speed of detection and speed of response. And if they're looking for assistance in doing so, LogRhythm's happy to help them out.
Well, Mike Regan, Chief Marketing Officer of LogRhythm, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck. Hope to talk to you again in the future.
Great. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah.